Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass.net. So, some of you might have seen a video that I released some time ago of my arrangement of the piece Solfeggietto by Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. Since then, I've been asked for some tips on learning that piece, so in this video I'll break down the first few bars for you and show you how you can go about learning other similar classical pieces. So that performance was at the end of a 12-day practice diary that I made on Facebook. I live streamed every day for 12 days documenting every step of learning the piece, and you can see the whole live stream series by either visiting the Talking Bass Facebook page or the vlog page over at talkingbass.net. I've linked to both pages in the info below, so if you're interested in learning the piece, check those out. You can get both the videos and you can also download the original score and my eventual bass arrangement in both sheet music and tab. So first of all, I'll just work through the opening few bars and give you some pointers on learning them. So we're going to look at this section. So let's start by just looking at the first phrase, which sounds like this. Okay, very, very simple, very short there. So we've pretty much got a C minor arpeggio. So we start on the E flat, 11th fret of the E string, drop down to the C at the 8th fret, then back up to that 11th fret. Then we jump up onto the A string, 10th fret for the G, up to the C, 10th fret D string, up to the E flat, 13th fret of the D string. And then we come down D and C, so 12th fret, 10th fret, D string, okay? So E flat, C, E flat, G, C, E flat, D, C. So that's the first phrase, and that's what we're going to stick with for a while. So you just want to get those notes under your fingers first. So in terms of the fingering on this hand, we're starting on the 4th finger, the pinky. So we've got for the E flat, then we drop down to the 1st finger for the C. Then for the 10th fret there on the on the A and the D string, we're using a bar of the 1st finger. And then 4th finger, 3rd finger, 1st finger for the E flat D C on the D string. Okay, and I'll talk more about the fingering and especially the finger picking in a little while, but I'm alternating picking on all of those notes. So we've got 2, 1, 2, 1, so middle index. So I start on the 2nd finger there, the middle finger. Okay, so that's the first phrase. Now, one of the keys to learning long solo pieces like this in any style is to deal with them in small chunks. Look at small phrases of a few notes and just practice those until you get comfortable. Don't try learning the whole thing in one go because you'll just get overloaded with information. Treat it like eating a large meal and just take it one bite at a time. You don't just stuff the whole table of food in your mouth, unless you're some kind of reticulated python, in which case, fair enough. But you're not a snake. You're a bass player. Very different. So if we look at that first phrase and just break it down into its component parts, we can just practice a few notes at a time. So if we look at that first part of the arpeggio, so we just work up the arpeggio there. And just start out slow, just getting the fingering down there, just making it nice and smooth. And you can take it as slow as you want, as slow as you need to. Just to get those notes down. And then just build up speed on them. Okay? Then, just add a few more. Maybe just one more. Okay, so we're just adding maybe one note or two notes at a time. Okay? So, now let's add the next phrase in there, which sounds like this. So altogether that would be... Okay, so we're looking at this bit. So we start on a B, 9th fret of the D string, come down to the G at the 10th fret of the A string, and then come up again to the B, up to the D, and then up to the G. So we've got the D, 12th fret, and G, 12th fret, D string, and G string. Then we come down, F, E flat, D. So 10th fret, 8th fret, G string, and then 12th fret, D string. Okay, so... Okay, so just take that as slow as you need to. Okay, and then you can add it to the first phrase. Okay. Now, in terms of memorizing these patterns, this is where having a good knowledge of arpeggios, scales, and intervals comes into play. When I see this phrase, I see a C minor arpeggio. It starts on the 3rd, down to the root, and then up. Then when we get up to the top there on the 3rd, we come down with a passing note down to the root. Then for the next phrase, G major arpeggio starting on the 3rd, up to the top, and then we come down through the 7th, the 6th, and the 5th, which because we're in C minor is essentially a G7 with a flattened 6th, or a Frisian dominant scale for any of you scale fetishists out there. Either way, we're working in a C harmonic minor scale at this point. So it's all C harmonic minor, we've got the arpeggios in there. So if you know those scales and arpeggios, this should all be really familiar territory for you, which makes memorizing it a lot easier. If you didn't know any of those scales or arpeggios, this would all be new stuff and it would be pretty hard to memorize. You'd be thinking of individual notes. You'd be thinking E flat, C, E flat, G, or you'd just be thinking of frets. Either way, that would be quite hard to memorize because you're just thinking note, 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 note. If you're actually thinking C minor arpeggio, G major arpeggio, much, much easier. Now, here's a little word on right-hand technique. Whenever I play anything like this, I try to be very strict when it comes to alternate picking. I'm starting on the 2nd finger, middle finger, and I'm alternating 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, round and round. Now I do this because I like to be consistent with every performance and play it with the same fingering each time. By starting with this strict alternate picking, I can also keep track of where I am and what mistakes I'm making really easily. If I make a mistake or get finger twisted, it's usually something to do with the picking hand. And if I have exactly the same finger picking pattern that I've planned out and I know that works, it's really easy to backtrack through the line. Now, that's not to say that I use alternate picking all the time. I start with the foundation of alternate picking, and then if I need to rake across any strings at any point, I purposely do it and I plan it that way, so I'm always aware of which fingers are being assigned to which notes. It's basically just creating a roadmap for the piece, which is much easier when I'm alternating as a default and then raking every now and then. The raked notes, they stand out more and they're a lot easier to remember that way. So I'll just work again through those first phrases and pay attention to the alternate picking here. So we have 2nd finger to start, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So I know that when I get to that D, that 12th fret there, at the end of there, I'm on the 2nd finger, okay? So at each point, I might have little waypoints that I always pay attention to and think, okay, well, that's supposed to be the second finger I'm on, that's supposed to be the first finger. I don't have to think of it all the time, you know, I generally just think 2, 1, 2, you know, I just let the fingers do what they do, you know, just go wiggle them like this. But, you know, if you pay attention to what finger you're on at certain points, like I say, just as little waypoints, then it's much, much easier to know if you're on track with the plan, okay? So, there I am, first finger. If I'd have landed on the second finger for that D, I know that something's gone wrong somewhere, that I'm not sticking with the game plan. And, you know, I might be all right at that point, but it might make, you know, some problems for me further down the line. So this is what I sit and practice when I'm playing these things. I'm just making sure that I'm consistent with the finger picking. Now let's add some more notes in there. Now I'm not going to work through every single fret in there because it'll take forever. I'm just going to work through the notes and tell you what the arpeggio patterns are. Remember, if you want the tablature, you can download it from the website. Just click that link in the info below. So, the next phrase sounds like this. Okay, so we're starting on an E flat here, and it's going to be a C minor arpeggio again. So we have E flat, C, E flat, G, C. Okay, so C minor arpeggio, and when we get up to that C, we shift, so we come up to the first finger. So once again, we've got the E flat, D, C, so minor third, passing note down to the root. Then we have this little line, which is a scalar line, and on the face of it looks just like a C melodic minor scale, which is what it is. But at this point, we're actually playing and implying a G7 arpeggio. So if we were to hear the harmony for that. Okay, so we've got C minor to G7. So this is actually the fifth of the G. Okay, so that's how I would be seeing this as I play it. So we've got the D, C, B, A, G, F, E flat, D, and then we're down to the C. But you know, if you know a melodic minor scale, just think melodic minor starting on that D. But in terms of the actual harmony that we're implying, it is a G. Okay, so just think that you're on the fifth of G. For the next two phrases, we have the following. Okay, so it's exactly the same as the first two lines that we played, but we're playing them an octave higher. Now, it's easy to do when you're here, you know, exactly the same pattern, you just repeat it. But when we get to the G there, the G major, we've got to jump right up there to the 24th fret. So if you don't have 24 frets, forget it, you won't be able to play this. But let's just have a see how that works. Okay, so we've got the G, F, E flat, D coming down just as we did down here. Okay, so you've really got to nail that jump as we come up. The hard part about that is that when we're on that D there, that high D, we're on the pinky there. So we're moving with the fourth finger, the pinky. So. Okay. Now for the next phrase, we've got something a little bit odd that sounds like this. Okay, now this isn't what you would see in the original score, because in the original score, it just keeps ascending with the same pattern that we've already played. But because we've only got a limited amount of notes to play with on the bass, we actually run out of notes. So what I've done here, especially on a 4-string bass, so I've just taken the first 3 notes there, E flat, C, E flat, and then instead of jumping up to the G and continuing, I've actually come down to the G down here, down at the, what's that, 24, 23, 22nd fret. So, and then we come up. So E flat, C, E flat, G, C, E flat. And then we come down, so we've got the D down to the C there, so come down to this D, and then down to that C. So, okay, so like I say, very, very different from the original line on the original score, but I think this one sounds okay. You know, I could have played it like this and put that high G in there, but it just ends up sounding a little bit odd, you know. And if you watch the practice diary, you'll see me doing this at, you know, on the fly. I was actually trying to figure out a decent fingering, and so that was the one that worked out the best. So watch the practice diary and see how I came to that conclusion. For the next line, we come down that exact same scale pattern that we played earlier, which looked like a C melodic minor scale. So, but we're playing it in a higher position. So originally we played it here, but now we're playing it here, just a couple of frets higher. So again, I'm coming down D, C, B, A, G, F, E flat, D, okay? Okay, so when we add that together, okay, so there's a gradual progression down from that higher position as we shift down here, okay? So before we move into the tricky arpeggio section, let's just try stringing all of those phrases together, okay? So slowly we have. Okay, so you want to try that slowly, and like I say, take it in small chunks. You know, just adding a note at a time if you have to, and then just gradually build up speed on each chunk. But eventually, you know, if you take your time, don't rush, you know, you want it to be clean all the way through. You know, as you do this, you will start to see these repeating patterns in there. You know, even though the fingerings are a little bit different as I'm moving up, so instead of playing, you know, instead of in that position, you know, starting with the, you know, first finger minor pattern, I'm actually using a second finger one, you know, as I come up there. I'm using different fingerings for the arpeggios just because of the movement around the neck. But you will start to see these general arpeggio patterns, you know, this third down to the root, up to the third and up, you know, and that's what you want to be looking out for. So now we have the tricky arpeggio section. So when I first tried playing this, as you'll see on the practice diary, it was a bit of a nightmare getting it under my fingers, and you know, it's a bit hair-raising when you first try it, but you know, after a bit of practice, it's not that bad. So, and if you've practiced arpeggios before, you know, and you know, various arpeggio patterns, you know, you'll get it under your fingers in no time. So we begin with a C minor arpeggio. So we have, so we're coming down from the E flat there, that high E flat, the third, and just coming down, third, root, fifth, third, root. Okay, and remember, I'm alternate picking on all of these. You know, and that can be quite tricky on here because we have second finger, first finger, and then we come back on that second finger. The temptation will be to rake, but I try to keep it alternating as much as I can. Okay? So when I get back to that C there, I'm on the second finger. Then I come up, we play another part of the C minor arpeggio, we go up to the root note, then fifth, and then we play the third down here. So like I said before, I'm progressing up and down the neck. So, you know, to get me in position for this A flat. A lot of this is preempting the other notes that are coming up. So we're going to be coming down to this F, you know, and I couldn't get down to that if I was playing that A flat up here, you know, so I'm always planning out the most effective route through the arpeggios. So, C minor, okay, then we come down onto the F minor. So we have C minor chord outline followed by F minor. So we're now A flat there, so 13th fret of the G string, and then we drop down to the F minor and just come up an F minor arpeggio. F, A flat, C, F, A flat, C. So, and then we actually get up as high as the 7th there, so that's going to be the E flat. So starting with the C minor again. So, E flat, C, G, E flat, C, C, G, E flat, A flat, F, A flat, C, F, A flat, C, E flat. Okay? For the next two arpeggios, we're outlining a B flat major and an E flat major. Okay? So for the B flat major, we start on the third of the chord, the major third there, which is the D, up on the G string, and we come down, D, B flat, F, D, B flat, okay? Okay, so we're just coming down a B flat major arpeggio. Then we jump up to the octave B flat there on the G string and come down fifth and third, okay? So just as we did with the C minor. So after the B flat major, we hit the G 12th fret of the G string, which is the third of the E flat major, and drop down to that E flat there, 11th fret of the E string. Then we just come up through the E flat major arpeggio. All the way up there, so we've got root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, and then we actually hit the 7th there, the D, which is on the G string. So, which sets us up to move into the C, which is in the next phrase that we won't be covering. Okay, that's as far as we're going to go. So we've got the B flat major. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so let's put all of those arpeggios together. So we start on the C minor, then, and that's it. Okay, so that, like I said before, that's a fairly tricky set of patterns to play if you've never played anything like this. I mean, it's real good practice for getting your arpeggio patterns down. But if you do know your arpeggios, if you do know a basic an E flat major arpeggio, it's very easy because you're just going up through it. That's all it is. You're coming down through an arpeggio, then coming up through an arpeggio, down through an arpeggio. If you know the arpeggios, you just string them all together. If you're learning them all as individual notes and you don't know any of those patterns, yeah, it might take you a while because you're going to be taking it one note at a time. So this is, again, a big one of the good reasons for learning your arpeggios and your scales and all that kind of stuff. So finally, we can just string all of those lines together. Now, like I said, start slowly and then just gradually build up speed. And make sure that as you're working through these lines, you really concentrate on nailing those position shifts, because you'll find that they're probably the parts that will really throw you off. So as you're coming up, that kind of move where we're on the 4th finger on the D there and then jumping up to the E flat, you've got to make sure that they're nice and smooth, and you don't want to be making staccato notes in there because you're trying to do the jump. It's got to be very clean, and if you have any problems with those shifts, isolate the move. So if you're on that D there, 12th fret, and you need to shift to that E flat with the 1st finger, just practice that move round and round and round, okay? So I'll just string those lines together at a fairly moderate tempo, okay? Okay, so that's the whole thing. So that's the first few bars of Solfeggietto. Remember, you can download the bass arrangement over at talkingbass.net. Just follow that link in the info below and take note of the tips that I've given you. Learn it in small chunks. Then pay special attention to your finger picking and maybe the thumb positioning. You want a really well laid out and reliable roadmap of movements that you can always fall back on. And lastly, use your knowledge of arpeggio, scales and intervals in memorizing the piece. It's much quicker to play a line like this, by just knowing it's a C minor, as you're working up there, rather than thinking E flat, C, E flat, G, C, learning it like that. Look for the arpeggios. So be sure to check out talkingbass.net and sign up for a free membership to gain access to all the cool practice resources in there. There are free ebooks to download like the Scale Reference Guide and a whole host of other practice resources in the practice room. Okay, check it out and I'll see you next week.